All right, welcome to what we are going to call episode 32 of the Athletic Philosopher Podcast. My name is Jordan Goldstein, your humble host, former university professor in sport history, philosophy, sociology, a little psychology. We used to write articles and lecture and give talks and be in the room with serious academic people, but no more. Now we are all in on coaching, life coaching, fitness coaching, endurance training coaching as the tribal professor, and also helping out my individuals in a one-on-one capacity. I am very excited for today's episode. Number one, you can see that I'm in a new location. If you are privileged enough to be watching this right now, you'll see I've got books behind me like I used to have in my professor's office. Finally setting up a little bit of my own space here in our new house in the North Shore of Chicago. And it's nice to be able to have my books behind me. Oh, my beautiful books. Pretty soon I'll be looking out at exercise equipment and a drum set and a guitar with an amplifier and have all my things that I require in order to live what I consider the good life. Books, music, fitness. Let's get it. Today is a very, I will call a special episode because I knew that I wanted to record something today. I had a thought, but then I got a beautiful question from one of my mutuals, one of my friends over on social media, and I just decided, you know what? This is going to be my topic for the day, and it's something that I've shied away from a little bit, I would say, too long, and sort of relates to my history as a university professor. We'll sort of tie all that up as we get going. But what I want to talk to you today about is what's going on in Canada? What's going on up there? Culturally, politically, especially, reverberating out from that big time Four Nations Cup international ice hockey tournament where we saw some wild things go down on the ice, especially between Canada and America. And I got a question this morning that's related to that. So I'm going to start by answering the question and giving kind of my first real take on all the silliness that's been going on between Canada, the United States, how ice hockey plays an important role in all of this, and why sports is a really important place to, we'll say, investigate and understand sometimes these broader political issues. Okay. So here is the question. I'm going to read it verbatim. That's a fancy word for word. All right. What does the term elbows up mean to the hockey community? I have heard opposing views on this since the new Canadian Prime Minister used it. I apologize for bringing you into the gutter, but I wanted to get your take on this. And then there's a hockey stick emoji and a Canada flag emoji. Pardon me for getting a little spit on when I mentioned the new Canadian Prime Minister. I am not a big fan of central bankers. And I'm not a fan of central bankers who become the leader of countries without proper votes. Sure, you can have a party vote, but whatever. We're going to get to some of this stuff throughout this episode. Okay, so the first question here, what does elbows up mean? For those of you who are maybe not as hyper aware of what's going on between Canada and the United States, there's a little bit of a trade war going on. There's a little bit of animosity. There's a little bit of conflict between the two countries with the largest undefended land border in the world. Now, this all started when the new American president, Mr. Trump, came into office and started taking some jabs at our former prime minister, Mr. Trudeau, about Canada becoming the 51st state and not pulling its weight in terms of, the United States subsidizing it in a way, shape, and form. And, rather than deal with this constructively, our former prime minister decided to pick a fight. You pick a fight with somebody who wants to pick a fight and somebody who wants to have that fight take place in the mud pit. Well, guess where we're all going to find ourselves very soon? Down in the mud pit, dirty and without any positive resolution. And that's certainly where we are in between Canada and the United States. And this is kind of tragic, but also pathetically predictable, at least from my vantage as a Canadian and somebody who is, we'll call expert in the production of Canadian national identity through Canadian culture. And one of the cool things about having this bookshelf right behind me while I'm doing this is I can pull out things like, here we go, like my own book, Canada's Holy Grail, Lord Stanley's Political Motivation to Donate the Stanley Cup. There aren't many people in the world who understand Canadian national identity, its deep roots in ice hockey, and how that's used as a positive projection of Canadianness out into the world than this guy who's talking right now. And that's not to toot my own horn, but there ain't many solo authored manuscripts, books, published by prestigious academic presses that deal with the topic, okay? I've got the citations, I've got the research, I've got the argument. It's all right here. So when I saw Canadians starting to get a little bit elbows uppy around, the barbs coming from the south, and I knew that there was this big international ice hockey tournament coming up, I kind of had an inkling that we were going to see some funky things. And lo and behold, we now have this entire political phrasing around a hockey term, which is elbows up. So what does elbows up mean? It's kind of a nasty thing, right? Elbowing in hockey is a penalty. Like when I take my elbow and I purposefully hit somebody with that elbow, that's a penalty. Like body contact and body checking is allowed in ice hockey, but there's particular parts of your body you're not allowed to check with, elbow being one. You can imagine an elbow coming square onto somebody's head, into somebody's chest, onto the back of somebody's neck. Like that can do some real damage, as opposed to basically like shoulder checking. Like shoulder checking, a little bit of that push motion with your hands. Those are acceptable ways that you can use your body in hockey to separate an opponent from the puck. That's the reason why we do body checking in hockey. It's to take the man away from the puck, gain possession of the puck, and then take it back towards the opposing goal. Now, within that, right, hitting can be used to hurt. Hitting can be used to intimidate. Hitting can be used to, quite frankly, like just break the rules. And elbows up is kind of a phrase that means, when I'm going into the corner to fight for the puck, guess what's coming? Big time elbow. I'm going to hit you in the head. I'm going to get you in the ribs when the ref's not looking. I'm effectively about to play dirty, is what elbows up means. Elbows up means I'm not going to take any crap and I'm going to fight back. Something like that. And, one of the most famous hockey players of all time, Mr. Hockey, Gordie Howe, was famous for his elbows, the elbows that he would throw, especially in the corner. So, a hockey rink, it's got these curved corners, these curved edges, and, the puck finds its way into the corners, and you're always kind of in there digging it out against some of the opponents with your stick. And this is a great time to give them a little shot with the elbows, specifically when the ref's not able to detect it, right? So elbows up is just simply like, I'm coming, I'm aggressive, and I'm not taking any crap anymore. So now we have an entire political party, the Liberal Party of Canada, that is using this terminology, elbows up. And it's this new, clarion call to patriotism in Canada, elbows up, as a defense against what is perceived as American aggression and transgression towards the sovereignty of Canada. I apologize for bringing you into the gutter. Yeah, I kind of feel like I'm down in the gutter right now. I'm not going to lie, but this is important. This is important stuff. I'm a Canadian. I'm living in the United States. We're going to travel back to Canada in 3 weeks. Like, our plan is to go back and live in Canada after a few years of being here in the States. I got to comment on this. And I know so much about the ways in which sport manifests itself as we'll call it the only positive display of Canadian national identity that exists. I feel like I just got to say something. So, one thing that is true about Canadian nationality that I think everybody now recognizes and sees as crystal clear, the biggest hallmark of Canadian national identity is anti Americanism. Think about the way that the country was formed. Like when we think about the American Revolution in 1775 and 1776, and, the culmination of that war, 1783, what happened? People think, well, there was a new country that was created, but two new countries were created, right? 1783, when the British surrendered to the brand new American Republic, 1/3 of the population of the 13 colonies didn't want to fight. They didn't want to secede. They didn't want a revolution. They wanted to stay under the aegis of the British Crown and King John III. And those British people went up north and they founded what is now Canada. Now, there were some French colonists that were already living up there, but the British had taken control of their territory through the French and Indian Wars, or the 7 Years' War. It was kind of like this dual conflict. Part of it was over in Europe, a different 7-year segment than the conflagration that happened over in North America. And also there's the, PC shine that the universities put on everything, and they don't want us to call it the French and Indian Wars anymore, but screw that. It's the French and Indian Wars. So the British had conquered the French in North America in 1760. This led to effectively the American Revolution, when the British had to figure out, well, what do we do with all these French-speaking people that we're now in control over in this foreign land? They eventually came up with something that was called the Quebec Acts. The Quebec Acts were one of the intolerable acts that the colonists used to justify their rebellion. But we don't need to fall right down the rabbit hole of North American and Canadian history. We do need a little bit of the rabbit hole. So those loyalists, and in Canada they're known as the United Empire Loyalists, they came up north after 1763 and created the colonies of Canada, Upper and Lower Canada. These eventually grew into the modern provinces of Ontario and Quebec in 1867. Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia, two of the other English-speaking colonies in Canada. They formed they came together through confederation and formed the Dominion of Canada. And the biggest reason the Dominion of Canada came to exist in 1867 was because of the American Civil War that was fought between 1861 and 1865. There's always been these, fears of American aggression. There's always been these threats, these hostilities that come from the South, largely from saber-rattling politicians who talk loudly but don't do anything, about we're coming to take Canada. We're coming to take the northern colonies, right? The whole continent is ours. Manifest destiny. Rah, rah, America. And in, 1864, these colonies, these British colonies, they looked at what Abraham Lincoln had put together in the Union Army that was crushing the Confederacy. And they just knew, deep in their bones, he's not going to dissolve this army. This army is going to look for something to do after this war is over. And the first thing they're going to do is turn north and come and conquer us. So we need to come together to prevent that. So the people who founded Canada wanted to be ruled by the British Empire. They did not want to break away. And the only reason they came together in a united political experiment was to stop the Americans from coming. Canada is defined by anti-Americanism, and that's not a good or a bad, that just is. And if you don't think that's true, you go study the history yourself and you come back and argue me on that. I will be happy to listen. But the fountain and the foundation of Canadian identity springs from not wanting to be American. You could have at one point made the argument that it was to remain British, but we don't even celebrate the fact that we're British anymore. We've spent the last 60 years in this country tearing down any vestiges and connections to the crown, unless when it's expedient for us. That's another thing about Canadian national identity. It's an expedient identity. It is used for whatever is necessary directly at the moment. It's pragmatic. It's not based in deep principles or identity. It's based in expediency. Like, hey, there's this giant army to the south of us. Why don't we come together and form an artificial construction known as Canada? I'm really harsh on Canada, but you have to understand Canada confederates in 1867, and by 1868, one of the provinces already wants out. New Brunswick and Premier Joseph Howe, they're like, get out. We want to be out of this thing. This is a bad deal. This is a raw deal. It's not going to work. It's not going to make any sense. And we should get out. We should quit while we're ahead, only being 1 year into this doomed project. Right? One of the four originals wanted to be out right away. Canada is not a country that has a strong sense of itself. It's always competing against one other part that's inside of it. Canada is English and French. Canada is Catholic and Protestant. Canada is East and West. Canada is industrious but agricultural. I mean, it's mostly agricultural, and it's mostly resources. Around the time that the nation state starts to become an important idea in politics, this is when Canada is coming together as a nation. And the theory of nationalism, as promoted by Johann von Herder, who was the German intellectual who essentially forwarded the idea of the nation state that everybody latched onto in the 19th century, he says that the nation has to be born out of a shared experience. So people who share the same history, the same traditions, the same language, the same food, the same dress, the same religion. People in Canada have never had that. They've never had a shared anything other than a shared experience of the land. Ding, ding, ding. And that's a really important factor into why sport is so powerful and so important for Canadians. So Canadians don't have a shared sense of identity. We're animated and defined by anti-Americanism, either latent or hyper, as we're experiencing now. So where do we get this positive sense of a Canadian identity? You know, one of the things that drove my intellectual curiosity about Canadian national identity was to ask the question, like, what are Canadians? What is Canada? Anytime I would ever ask this question, I would always get a negative response. Canadians aren't this. Canadians aren't that. Or I'd get some silly answer that Canadians have healthcare, like a political policy, right? Like a piece of legislation that is shared by dozens of other countries in the world is a good enough reason to have to have it as a national identifier, right? But it's not healthcare. You know what it is? We're not Americans. That's what people mean when they say Canadians have healthcare, right? We have a universal health insurance scheme that's directed by each of the provinces, right? We have rationed care. But the Americans, they don't. And so we use that as a, look what we have, and they don't, assuming a sense of smug superiority. That's another thing about Canadian national identity. Anytime we can be a little bit over the Americans, a little bit better than the Americans at anything, we are going to ride that off into the sunset. We're the little brother. We got little brother syndrome. We're insecure. America is the biggest, the most powerful, most successful country that's ever existed, and we are right next to it with a very similar culture, with a very shared history, and we're just not that impressive compared to them. So we always have to feel inadequate. There's an imposter, there's an inferiority complex. It runs deep in the Canadian psyche. And so when Trump says you're going to be the 51st state, hundreds of years of history bubble right up to the surface, and you get the elbows up response. Now, elbows up, again, is a hockey term. And we saw the world of politics and the world of sports crash together in February during the Four Nations Cup, which was supposed to be just like an exhibition style all-star weekend type of vibe, with the players in the NHL representing four of the countries, the United States, Canada, Finland, and Sweden, and just sort of playing a nice little exhibition style tournament, right? But this came right as the heat was being dialed up by President Trump and the response by Prime Minister Trudeau, right? Trump says, fix the border. Trudeau says, let's have a trade war. Great. So everybody is freaking out on both sides of the border over this stuff, and leave it to the hockey players to take matters into their own hands, literally. Like, everybody in the sports world, everybody in the politics world had their eyes fixated on these Four Nation Cup games, especially the first game between America and Canada, because Canadian hockey fans had started to take matters into their own voice by booing the American national anthem at National Hockey League games in January and in February. So now we start to see the Canadian population showing their Canadian pride by being anti-American, displaying this at the one cultural activity that is known to be Canadian, right? I've long had this phrase burned into my brain about hockey in Canada ever since my one professor, when I was doing my PhD, mentioned this about Canada and hockey. And it's just so true. Hockey is the only thing in the world that Canadians are known to have invented and are known to be the best in the world at. It's the only thing. There may be other things that Canadians have invented and that we're the best in the world at, but nobody knows about it. Everybody knows Canada and hockey. Everybody around the world. It's a stereotype for a reason, and honestly, I think that's a pretty sweet stereotype. I'd much rather be known for creating a sport that's loved by millions and millions of people around the world as the hallmark of my national identity than what? I bomb the most people. I take over the most countries. Like I think it's great. I think sports as a conduit of peace are very important. And Canadians like to think of themselves as peacekeepers, although that's another one of our national mythologies. That's scratch a little bit and that'll come right off. But, the global spread of hockey has been one of the great crowning achievements, I think, of Canadian culture. Probably the greatest achievement of Canadian culture. Because it's the one thing that's so deeply tied to our identity. I mentioned that Canadians don't have any shared elements of culture, except for having to brace the environment, having to live in a harsh and unforgiving land that's dominated by the winter 6 months of the year. And so our ability to use that commonality to create a beautiful sport that we are proud to export, but also proud to dominate the rest of the world in performance-wise. This is the one thing where everybody comes together. Everybody wants to pull on a Team Canada jersey and cheer for the boys in red and white when it's hockey time. Like, there's just nothing that brings people together any more closely than that in the country. When the NHL players were finally allowed back into the Olympics following, oh my gosh, losing to Sweden in the 1994 Olympics. Dang you, Tommy Salo, with that beautiful toe save on Paul Kariya in the shootout. I remember that. Who doesn't remember that? Who watched it? But then in 1998, we get the NHL players. It was very similar to like the Dream Team and the Americans, right? The Americans are not winning the Olympic gold medal. They're getting beat by the Soviets and sort of like the up-and-coming European teams, Yugoslavia. And they say, you know what? Like, we're sick of this. And the Olympics for 1992 decided to let in professional athletes. For the very first time. Explicit professional athletes. I'm not even going to get into how much of a joke that is. I got all my Olympic history books back here too, team. We can start going into history now. This is fun. But, we finally get the NHL players. And 1998, it's like, we got Wayne Gretzky on the team. We're going to win the gold. This is great. And, oh, man, Canada doesn't even medal. They get booted in the quarterfinals by the Czech Republic and Dominik Hasek, the Dominator, again stoning us in a shootout. And you leave Wayne Gretzky on the bench in a shootout. Mark Crawford, enemy of Canada forever for doing that. But you can see, like, I'm even talking about this stuff that's, oh my gosh, what, 25 years old, 30 years old, and it's still animating me. It's still animating me in a really fun and enthusiastic and positive way because we just care so much about hockey. And that brings us to 2002 in the Olympics in Salt Lake City. And the Americans have this like unbeatable streak in the Olympics on home ice, right? There's the whole 1980 Miracle on Ice that happened in Lake Placid. And the two times the United States had hosted the Olympics before, both times in Lake Placid, 1932 and 1980, they had won the gold and they had basically never been beaten. So they have this unbeaten streak on home ice. They're hosting the Olympics again in 2002. Canada and the U.S., of course, they meet in the finals. And Canada puts up one of the greatest performances. 5-2 victory. Joey Sakic, Burnaby Joe scores 2 goals. Mario Lemieux with that incredible dummy play. I think it was Korea, actually, that scored that goal. I'm sorry, Paul, if you didn't. Man, what a great play by Mario. So Canada wins. We break the streak. We get our first gold medal in the Olympic tournament in 50 years. We had basically just been sending amateur teams, like the best senior men's team, not even professionals, was good enough to be our Olympic representative and win all of the Olympic ice hockey medals until 1952 when the Soviets showed up and they brought their professionals and they started to win all the tournaments. But this was big. Like, I remember watching this. I remember it was February. My dad had a convertible. We put the top down. We grabbed all of our Canada gear and Canada flags, and we drove down the main strip in the city that we were living in. And there were like hundreds of cars and thousands of people on the streets in the middle of winter going absolutely crazy that Canada had just won the gold medal game. Now, fast forward this to 2010, and now the Olympics are in Canada. They're in Vancouver. Canada and America again find themselves in the gold medal game. And if you can imagine, Canada at this point has 30 million people. It's estimated 24 million people watch that game in Canada. 24 out of 30 million tuned in at one point to watch this game in 2010, where Sidney Crosby scores the golden goal in overtime. Iggy off the boards, beating Ryan Miller. Short side. Beautiful. Just absolutely beautiful. Right? So hockey is this place where Canada traditionally goes to show Big Brother, hey, we got something of our own and you're not taking it from us. You ain't taking it from us. So now put this into the context of you're going to be the 51st state and we're going to smoke you with tariffs and these threats that are coming from the South. And this idea that Canada just cannot give in to the Americans is a little bit hard-headed and it's a little bit silly. And to be fair, the Canadian population has been propagandized pretty hard against President Trump for the past 9 years, 10 years. And so they're a little bit unreasonable when it comes to anything that comes out of his mouth. And that's not to defend Mr. Orange Man, but it's to put some proper context into the situation that even his reasonable demands, like, hey, could you guys stop the fentanyl that's coming across your border? And instead of, yeah, we both have a shared interest in not allowing harmful drugs to come across the border, it's no, we're gonna have a trade war and we're gonna decide to go dollar for dollar in tariffs with the world's biggest economy and our biggest trading partner. She's not very smart. Canadians are not very smart. They let their anti-Americanism blind them to their detriment. So this is the context of this four nations face-off. And is it any surprise to see 3 fights happen in the first 11 seconds? The players, they are feeling the energy. They sense that this is not just a hockey game. The Americans are not happy that their national anthem is being booed. It's disrespectful. They haven't done anything. It's not even the people of America. It's particular parts of the government. The government's not the people. Come on. Hate the government, love the people. That's my political advice. Hate the government, love the people. Doesn't matter who the government is. Doesn't matter which party it is. They don't love you. They don't care about you. The people care. The people have love. The people have hearts. The government has no heart. Anyways, that's an aside. That's an aside. So we get fireworks, right? We get 3 fights. We get fisticuffs, right? We get the Kachuk brothers picking fights with people that are smaller than them. We got Colton Parayko bludgeoning another guy that's smaller than them. Not one of those fights were really equal. That's not true. The Hagel one wasn't so bad. I don't think. Was it Hagel? Now I'm misremembering. So we'll just clean off that, and we'll just move forward. So we have this hockey game where everybody is fighting, and in the round robin, the Americans win. They win in overtime, and of course, just like Big Brother, who came in and stole the toy of the little brother and started to use it better than he did, they try to rub it in our faces. Like, it's our game now. Bah! And you see all these social media posts with like Freebird and the eagle soaring and, the Kachuk brothers fighting, and it's not playing well, number one, because it's not exactly how the game went. But Canadians are not interested in this. Like, they are just not interested in this. And you want to talk about what happens when somebody feels cornered? Think about like that wild animal that's fighting for its life and it's injured, and you back it up into a corner. What do you think it's going to do? Is it going to just like shrivel up and not fight? No, it's going to come at you about as hard as it possibly can coming out of that corner. And that's what we're kind of seeing right now in Canada. Everybody's pissed. Like, they're blocking off the liquor stores from American products. People are not buying American products at the grocery stores. There's this ridiculous groupthink in Canada that takes over. Maybe you all saw it during the pandemic. But, to be a good Canadian is to just follow along with the crowd and do what everybody else does. Deference is the word that defines our national culture more than anything. I'm just going to defer to what other people are doing, to what authority says, and I'm going to follow along, and I'm going to march in step. Elbows up. We're going to come out of the corner, and if you're coming at us, you're going to hit the elbows. You're going to hit the elbows. So we get this Four Nations final. It's a rematch. This was supposed to be an exhibition-style tournament, but the players, God bless hockey players, they're the best athletes. The best team sport by far. In no other sport would an exhibition game turn into an absolute slugfest. Like, players punching each other in the face, bare-knuckled, like throwing wild hits, laying it all on the line, right? For an exhibition game. But it's because this matters in Canada. This matters more than anything. Like, any piece of legislation, any tit-for-tat tariff, it's never going to mean as much as beating the Americans in our game. It's never going to mean as much. So, of course, it's a tight game, and just like in 2010, we go to overtime. We get another golden goal. We get Connor McDavid zinging this one past Connor Hellebuck. Canada wins 3-2. Rah, Team Canada. It's our game. You're not going to take our country. Elbows up. All this stuff. And let me tell you what. You're never going to hear this type of political rabble-rousing if Canada loses. If Canada loses that game, there's no such thing as national confidence. There's no such thing as a sense of vigor. There's no dynamic energy coming from the country, because that's the only air we have to fill up this balloon. In 2010, the Prime Minister of Canada, Stephen Harper, had to tell people it's okay to wave your flags. It's okay to be proud when we are competing in the Olympics. Canadians, they're deferential. It's not seen to be appropriate to be puffing out your chest, to be bragging, to be hot-shotting it all over the place, except for in the world of sports. In the world of sports, Canadians all cheer for the same team. It's the one place where we're all united. It's one of the reasons the Olympics is so big time in Canada. It's really big time in Canada. Winter Olympics, by far, is like the biggest sporting event that happens in Canada. Summer Olympics are very important, but they're not like the winter. Like, we're just not a summer paradise. We are a winter wonderland. So the Winter Olympics are always going to mean more. The fact that we got the most amount of gold medals in Vancouver of any host nation or any nation ever at the Winter Olympics, 15 gold medals, like, that's a big deal. It's a really big deal in Canada. Heck, we're putting Terry Fox on our money team. Terry Fox is like a hero 20-year-old who had his leg amputated, right? And then decided to run across the country in order to raise money for cancer, right? He's on our money. He's like our greatest, he was voted our greatest Canadian, pretty much. And I think he is the greatest Canadian. So sports have an outsized impact on Canadians' ability to feel and express a positive sense of national identity. So as we are embroiled in this political, I don't even know what to call it, like toxic garbage stew, that's probably the best way I could put it. Canadians will always go to a hockey analogy. They'll always go to a hockey phrasing. They'll always do something that reminds them that we are superior in one way. We're not superior in pretty much any other way to the Americans. Who cares though? It's not a bragging contest. Like, can't we just be proud of what we have, and the Americans can be proud of what they have, and we can be friends and all these things, and we can trade. And the thing is, this is just bringing up all of the historical insecurities around Canada, that if we have closer ties with America, we will effectively become dissolved through osmosis by greater contact with them. It's a real historical fear. I have pages and pages and pages in this guy, in the book, that's just on this national identity crisis, and especially when it comes to our contact with the Americans. There's always this historical fear that closer contact with the Americans means Canadian dissolution. And that's what you're seeing played out. It's a very interesting experiment. It's a very interesting case study in how deeply sport roots itself into the individual and collective psyches of people when there's nothing else to fill the void. Canadians have no sense of national identity. It does not exist absent of sport. I'm sorry. That's my expert historical take on the subject. There is no sense of Canadian national identity that is positive outside of sport. Come at me, bro. Where are your arguments? I'm taking them all. I'll take them all down. At least I'm confident I can. And if not, I'm happy to be proven wrong. Happy to be proven wrong, because that's something that drove me to locate sports as this powerful identifier. And it's just so clearly true in all of our experiences. But there's a funny thing with academics and intellectuals. They don't like sports. They don't like giving sports their due as crucial and important cultural products. And so what we've done here today is just simply explore this idea of elbows up in a political context. Like, why the heck is Mark Carney using them? Why are he and Mike Myers shooting political propaganda ads with hockey jerseys on? Elbows up. Those guys had never been in no scrum before, I'll tell you that much. You've never been in a scrum. Anyways, I think that this is a really intriguing way to investigate sports, right? We talk all the time about the superficiality of sports, the overconsumption of sports. I talk all the time about playing sports with your heart, with love, finding the spiritual elements, the spiritual nature, tapping into that as an important vein of personal development and growth, virtue, character development. But collectively, sports are identifiers. Sports are communal. Sports are expressions of the Volk, of the people. The people love sports. They love games. And being able to probe into that love seriously, extract out the lessons and the meaning of why these things matter so much, I just think it helps us understand the way people act and why they latch onto the sports world. And in this particular scenario, we've got now an entire country that's riled up and ready to fight as if the gloves came off, and that's the only option. And when it comes to my own opinion on all of this stuff regarding the tariffs, the sovereignty of Canada, the 51st state, I'll hold my tongue, because this is not a place for my personal political opinion. I gave pretty much my view into it when I said hate the government, love the people. That's about my political view. It's my politics. So to me, it's kind of immaterial. What is valuable is watching the way people act around sports, how they create these totems of meaning and identity around particular sports, and how that manifests out into their actions. And my final thought on this: always beware of politicians who utilize sports to promote a particular agenda. Always. Every single one of them. That's not to say they may not be right, but I'm skeptical. Why? Are they doing it from the love of their heart? Are they doing it from intrinsic motivation? No, there's an external purpose. They want to be popular. They want to be liked. They want those poll numbers going up. They want your support so that they can be in power over you. And when I'm talking about sports, their deepest meaning and their deepest value, it's impossible to touch that without intrinsic motivation being the driving force. I can't play for love if money is the thing I care about the most. There's one great example. This is why we're skeptical of the integrity of professional athletes. And rightly so. We recognize for the love of the game may not be the biggest thing that's driving them, nor should it necessarily. So in all of this, I want you to recognize how deeply sports are intertwined with political processes when it comes to culture, identity, and particular politicians, political parties, and political movements capitalizing on the deep popularity and animating spirit that sports give communities. And I would just ask everybody to question why. Why are they doing this? Why this time? Why this sport? What do they want out of it? What is the other part of the exchange? In Canada, elbows up is a rally around the flag. That's a rally around the flag call. And excuse me if I am not convinced. Most of the people who are saying elbows up were totally willing to tear the country down over the past 10 years or so of Justin Trudeau's rule of wokeness. We're talking about people that are toppling the statues, cheering triumphantly of the country's founders, removing street names, removing people off of the money, renaming universities, basically saying that the Canadian flag is a hate symbol because people who disagree with us politically are using it. They're also Canadians. This is legitimately what people said about the trucker convoy. They said they appropriated the Canadian flag and turned it into a hate symbol. These are the same people rallying around the flag right now. The people who told you to stay in your home. The people who said, hey, if you don't want to take this experimental medical product, you don't deserve access to society or our health care. You're the patriots now? Give me a break. This is one of the problems, particularly with Canadian national identity. It's based on expediency. The people who are wrapping themselves in the flag and saying elbows up, they'll throw it in the trash can tomorrow and light it on fire if it promotes their particular power, individual or collective. So excuse me if I'm not all elbows uppy with you guys. I find it kind of a joke. And to use hockey, which is the one constant of Canadian identity that's true, both in the terms of sport being true and honest, but also just look at the history of the country and what really does make Canadians the most proud of where we live. Was it any of that woke stuff that made people proud? No. It was Colton Parayko beating up somebody who was smaller than him, saying, the Kachuk brothers won 2 fights, but we at least won 1. Hey, Connor McDavid scored the overtime winner. We're still the best at hockey. Most Canadian pride of the past decade, right there. So you people, with your expedient patriotism, leave sports alone. You're cheapening them. You're making them shallow and superficial. You're subjecting them to an external motivation to show that you're proud of the country that you would just so easily toss into the dustbin. Nah, that ain't it. That just ain't it. I'll use American slang if I want to as well. So to circle back here to the start, to my friend, I apologize for bringing you in together, but I wanted to get your take on this. Well, that's my take. Elbows up is a really great way to frame this from a Canadian perspective. And I'm not interested in seeing my country bulldozed, but to be fair, I'm not a big believer in the country based on my understanding of its history and also my experiences in the country over the past 5 years with the way people act towards fellow Canadians who all don't just fall in line with what we're being told we are supposed to believe. I ain't interested in being deferential. I'm interested in having my own elbows up. We'll get back to philosophizing, although this is pretty good philosophizing, I would suggest. I'm interested to see what you guys think about this one. We just hit record and we see what happens. We'll see you guys in the next one. Hockey is the greatest sport. Canada is the first nation of hockey. May not always be that way, but hey, we won one game, didn't we? Peace and love.